Hannah,
Yes.
what did one game piece say to the other game piece after winning the game?
What?
When describing that moment, he said, I was moved.
Let's move away from lies and fears. Perhaps it's time to leave. Coming out from the edge of deception, sailing into a new destination. Wanna join when you're walking and living out. Free. Laying down all the past situations. Every step is a new motivation. Wanna join when you're walking and living out.
Thought he was going to go for the sorry joke, but
Yeah. I'm sorry.
I'm really sorry
I had to hear that.
for that bad pun.
Let's just say that you don't have a monopoly on these jokes.
your jokes really bored me.
I only came up with Uno joke.
Okay.
It was
Make it stop. Make it stop.
Thank you, friends.
Take it away, Gabe.
For this week's episode of Chattercast, we're going to be talking about the board game industry and some games that we're excited about. We're going to talk about board games, virtual board games, all the above. And I'm joined, of course, by my lovely wife, Hannah. We don't have to socially distance. The other people are not
socially distancing,
which are Derek and Joel and Brian, and the person I'm going to turn it over to first, and that is Gabe. Gabriel, feel free to take it away.
So, we are going to be talking about virtual tabletop games. That's why all the bad puns happen. I'm so sorry about that, but it's fine. It's fine. We forgive.
Sorry, not sorry.
Sorry.
Even we move on.
Sorry.
you're going to keep on doing the sorry joke? We're just not going to stop doing the
Sorry.
sorry joke.
So, because of everything that's been happening, we've been enjoying a lot of tabletop games, including virtual tabletop games, including like Yahtzee, Hand and Food. We've been playing a lot of cards. I personally have been playing a lot of cards and a lot of Yahtzee and like all these different kinds of games. And it's just exciting to have this opportunity to be able to still, participate in virtual games with people. And I know we talk about video games and all those things, but there's something special about tabletop games. When I was a little kid and when I was growing up, it was just like this family thing that we would come together and we would just enjoy one of these things. And much of it was joining one another and being able to be there, but just the memories that comes out of it, just being able to play these virtual games, it's just exciting. I don't know. What do you guys think?
The best part about it is no one can bend your cards. There's always that one guy when you're playing the game who just bends the cards. Look at me now. You can't bend the cards because
No one can look at your cards.
I'm the only one who gets really anal about not letting anyone else shuffle a deck in certain games because people will like either do like a Vegas shuffle where they'll riffle through the cards and bend them, and they won't do the reverse bend to bring them together, and so you just end up with bent cards. And I'm like, stop.
But it looks cool. But it looks cool.
It looks cool, but when you do the riffle shuffle, and you bend them the other way, and they all like shoot together.
Listen, okay.
And then you have flat cards.
This segment is about forgiveness.
Yeah.
Okay. Vengeance is the Lord as he flips over the board.
Manufacturers, if you make cards that are non-standard sizes, do us all a favor and either include custom card sleeves or sell them on your website.
Yep.
Wow. We're very passionate about this.
Anyway, so
My games will last forever. Derek, do me a favor. I want you right now, can you list 3 virtual board game things, tools, simulators?
I can.
I don't think that he can.
I
All right.
I don't think he can.
You can do this.
There's Board Game Arena.
Yes.
There's Tabletopia. And there's Tabletop Simulator. The first 2 are free, but you pay for certain games. The second one you have to pay for, but a lot of people have mods out and stuff that once you pay for it, you can join their game. So a cool fun fact, though, during this time, I don't think virtual tabletop games will ever replace just in-person game playing, which is a good thing. I enjoy doing that. But a cool thing during this time is that once a week I used to go to a gaming store and play games with people. We haven't been able to do that, but a lot of those same people have been hopping online, and we've been able to play with each other that way. And so it's just been kind of really cool to explore virtual tabletop games as a small alternative to everything that's going on now. And some publishers are actually using virtual tabletop games to promote their product, or they'll put like their first scenario on there so you can test it. So it's been a lot of fun to explore with that. What about you guys? What other things have you guys been doing with that kind of stuff?
Oh man, well, we've just been, what I like about the virtual stuff, and for the viewers, they have like a cornucopia of different games on there, games that you would never even imagine playing.
Good word.
And when you go in there, it can sometimes be almost intimidating. Like the one that I like is Tabletopia. They have a free version on there, and they still have a lot of games. They have like 400 or some games on there, games you'll probably never have time to play in your life. But just the options. And it's very easy to go to what you know, because you know it, and it's easy. But it's always fun to try out something new, to click on a game and say, "Oh, this was kind of neat. Let's see." And it will give you like the time frame, like is it 40 minutes? Is it 2 hours? Like what is the estimated time frame? So when you jump into it, you kind of get an idea of what you're signing up for. But you can try some games and realize that they're just not great. And that's what me and Gabe did. Is we tried this one game. I'm not gonna say what it is, but just realized it was just not our cup of tea. We played for like an hour, and we're just like, yeah, this is not a.
But it's still exciting. What do you say? Like whenever I go to, I like table games, board games, tabletop games. Yeah, board games. But it's not as easy just to first find somebody that has the games, and second, go to the store and just like buy one or whatever, because there are some games that, because of the pieces and all those things, the prices are kind of high, at least for me personally. So I wouldn't be able to buy this, but being able to use all these virtual games, it lets me try new things. As Joel was saying, this new game that wasn't exactly what we would have liked, but now we know that if we were to go to a store, we wouldn't buy that game. So
I'd say that we do have, John and I have a few physical board games that we haven't had a chance to play until now, with the isolation and more time on our hands. But the fact that like it's just the two of us, I mean, we have some games that we want to play with other people and add people to that group. Maybe there's 3 or 4 player games that we want to play, and having that opportunity to do it online just helps us to connect in that way. So obviously this has given us more time to play those 2-player games, but having the virtual option lets us to have community in that sense.
Yeah, I found that we try to get games that can be played 2-player, just because we live together. So it's nice to not have to wait to get a group of people together to play a game. But there are games out there that if it's like 2 to 4 players, usually game designers have been really good about making the game scale well at 2, 3, or 4 players. That's typical that I've found in a lot of 2 to 4 player games. But if it's like 2 to 6 players or even higher than that, I found those games either do really poor at the top number or really poor at the bottom number. Like it's not that great of a game at 2-player, or it's not that great of a game when you have 6 people. So it can be kind of hard to find games that are both good with a group and just the 2 of us. And so we've had to be really strategic in the games that we buy. And there are games that, right now we can't play. But having that virtual option is really cool. We've also, if any of you are familiar with, I think Jackbox is this party pack of games. I have a friend who owns like all of the packs, like all of the Jackbox games, and he'll stream from his house on Zoom. Like he'll share his screen on Zoom, and we'll all be at our different houses playing on our phone. And it's really cool because those are some fun times, hanging out in his living room, all of us together playing Jackbox on the TV. And being able to do that over Zoom is really cool. So I think there are creative opportunities we can all have to continue to enjoy this social thing that we all love, board games, even when we're not in the same room.
Yeah.
Cool.
Derek, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with all that. moving on from virtual, there's a lot of stuff in just the regular board game industry that's still going on, which is glad to hear. One thing we want to talk about real fast. So a huge smash hit of a game came out in 2017, I believe, called Gloomhaven, which is like an RPG game in a box. It's so huge. So many people play it. No one's ever heard of it. Anyways,
yeah, it's definitely not a box as big as my chest.
It's huge. It's like
it's huge.
That big.
So big.
Anyways, I have it downstairs, so grab it. Anyways, they're coming out with a sequel, Frosthaven, which, as we're recording this, is on Kickstarter. So they had a goal of raising $500,000 to be able to finish completing this game. I looked today; the Kickstarter is now up to almost $9 million. $9 million. So that's pretty crazy. So that game, at least, is still growing and the industry is expanding. So that's good news. What do you guys think about just, again, the love of physical tabletop games and the industry? Do you guys see it expanding even past now, or what do you guys think about that?
Well, just thinking about Kickstarter, I have several projects that I backed last year that are supposed to ship between now and October, a handful of different projects in the board game world. And they've all been very communicative during this time. You know, a lot of them, they're manufactured in China. They might be waiting to get on a boat, they've got a pallet of 5,000 games and they can't ship them yet. And so I think that the physical board game industry has been slowed down. But at the same time, in the last couple of weeks, I've been getting some updates from a lot of those projects that the factories that they're working with have been very clear with them and very active in communicating with them and letting them know that, hey, we're able to reopen now. We have a limited number of staff, so things are delayed, but we're getting to it. And so I'm seeing a lot of video game designers who are saying, like, we still think we're going to be able to hit our delivery date. And so seeing that it hasn't ground the industry to a halt and that it's still moving is very encouraging for me. And then also along those same lines, thinking about how massive Gloomhaven was when it came out. And I don't just mean it was a really big, intimidating game. You open it up and there's 1,000 pieces to it. It was also extremely popular. A lot of people really, really like it, and for good reason. It's a solid game. I've enjoyed it quite a bit. And when Frosthaven was announced, I was looking at I think it was Becca Scott from Geek and Sundry who was sharing like Instagram stories about Frosthaven, and that a friend of hers is actually doing all these voiceovers for all of the scripted pieces and the story elements in Frosthaven for the companion app, so that you can actually hear the story being told instead of just someone at the table reading it, which I think is really cool. And I love to see board game designers be creative like that. I know there's actually, I think, a bit of a tension in the industry. Some people like app-assisted board games, some don't. I like the idea of having something that adds to it, but isn't necessarily required to be a part of it. So, yeah.
Very cool. Brian, any board games that you've enjoyed playing during this time or things that you're looking forward to?
I've been playing a lot of Hand and Foot as well, and like 2-player games, Battleship and all that. Personally, like going to the Walmart, going down the game aisle, seeing like all the games are gone. Maybe not all the like crazy complex games, but like people are going to get like the Monopolies and the Saris. So people are able to take their time and play games now and not be all busy all the time. So
yeah, the Target near us has for a normal kind of store, it actually has a pretty respectable selection of board games. And we were there about a week and a half ago, and I walked by because I was curious to see if it was slammed, and it was like almost completely empty. And so it was really cool. I was like, hey, people are buying board games.
So they're board games or puzzles?
It was board games, yeah, mostly board games.
Yeah.
So.
One of the cool board games we got to check out right before the virus hit and we all had to go to isolation was Marvel Champions. So super excited. It's a customizable card game of sorts where you play as a hero that has their own deck of cards, and you're fighting against bad guys. So hopefully we'll have some footage rolling as we're describing that. But one other cool thing that just got announced recently was that they have an expansion coming out calling about the rise of Red Skull. So you get 2 new heroes, Spider-Woman and Hawkeye in there, which is really cool. The other thing that I'm super enjoying about this is that it now has sort of a campaign mode. So in the original game, you kind of do this once and done scenarios. Now your scenarios kind of add up and you can update your deck with different new cards and things like that, and kind of gives you a feeling of like playing part of a Marvel movie, or as you're challenging these different bad guys until you get to the Red Skull. So we played it as a team a little bit a while ago. What did you guys think of that game, and are you guys excited about the expansion coming out?
Oh yeah, it was fun. It's one of those games that when you look at it the first time, you go, "What's going on here?" But then when you start to understand it, it's like many things in life. You look at it, you're like, how the heck does that work? But then when you start breaking down step by step, you go, okay, so it's cool. You can kind of play around, like the cards are kind of laid out in a circle, and you play it around. And I think it's an interesting way to play a card game, to play a deck boarding game. And it's also neat that you have a variety of cards you can kind of switch in and out of.
Yeah.
So it keeps it fresh.
Definitely. I would agree with that. I think, like with a lot of games, I would say the first round is usually the longest round, and then the second round's about half as long, and then the third round is really when you get in your stride. Games that are intuitive, at least. And I think that Marvel Champions was a pretty intuitive game, that once you played through a round or two, you really had a good feeling of how the game played, and you were able to take your turns pretty quickly. And I like that. And there was an interesting mechanic, unlike a lot of deck building games where, you draw your hand at the start of your turn, and whether you use cards or not, you discard your hand at the end of the turn. With Marvel Champions, you actually had a choice where you could discard, you could hold on to. So like if you don't use a card, it stays in your hand unless you choose to discard it. But the thing is, in a lot of deck building games, if you guys have played many, then you know that typically there's a few different things that you want your deck to be good at. And if you're never cycling through your cards, then you're never getting access to those abilities. And so you, in this game, instead of the choice being made for you, where every round you're discarding and drawing a new hand, in this game you have to decide, do I want to discard? Maybe it's not worth it yet, but in a round or two it might be. So I'm going to hold on to it. But do you have other cards that, well, I could hold on to it, but I'm really hoping I draw this card. And so you have to make these strategic decisions. Keep in mind what you haven't drawn yet, what's in your hand. Do you want to put down a card to gain a card? And you have to kind of think through that every turn, because you have to decide, do I want to let go of what I have in hopes that I draw something better? So that mechanic to me set it apart from a lot of deck building games, and is probably the thing that stood out to me the most. Derek, what are your thoughts on that part of the mechanic? I thought was really intriguing.
Yeah, it's really challenging at first because, as John was explaining, your cards do multiple things. So your cards, you need to spend cards to pay for other cards. And as John was saying, if you have cards, and I have some here, I'm not sure if you guys will be able to see them, but if you have cards in your hand, you can only draw up to a certain limit. And so you have to decide every time, do I want to get rid of this card so I can have a chance to draw up to more other cards? And I think that kind of brings us to our faith point. A lot of times, and when we were playing this, Hannah brought this great thing up. She was like, you have to be willing to lay down some cards in order to have the ability to gain some new stuff. And I think that could be like us in life. Sometimes we're holding on so tightly to what we have that we're not willing to let go and see what God might bless us with. And there's a great scripture in Matthew 16:25. It says, if you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it. And that's what Jesus is saying to us. Again, sometimes we're trying to make sure we have all the money to take care of everything we need, or have all the fame or whatever. And Jesus is basically saying, if you're willing to give up that priority in your life and put me first, I will give you more in return. And so there's always this struggle that we have in life where we're going to hold on to something because we're desperate, because we feel like we have to, or we're going to be willing to let that thing go in order to have God bless us. What do you guys think about that kind of concept, being willing to let some things go so that God might be able to bless us even more than what we can see?
Well, one thing that also stands out to me about the game is it's a cooperative game. You're all working together to defeat this villain. And so you're not just going to affect yourself when you're making this decision on what you're going to let go of or hold on to. You're also affecting the people around you, the people that are on your team. So sometimes you have to make those decisions in life for the sake of other people, for the benefit of other people. And it's all about seeking God's direction in that, and how whatever sacrifice he's calling you to make is going to bless maybe someone else and not you.
Great point. Joel, what do you think?
Well, I think that overall, like, you know, I think that that the word says the old way has to die to make way for the new thing. You know, Jesus says, don't put new wine in an old wineskin. Why does that matter? What's a wineskin? Well, wineskin was usually made of like a leather, and it would crack if you try to put new wine, and it would just break apart. So you'd have to get like a whole new wineskin to get the new wine for it to work. Otherwise, it would break, it would crack apart. So the same with our lives. We got to put aside the things of our old self, the things that have held us back, in replace of the better, the new. And just as Hannah said, it's not just about us. It's about our impact on this world. We look at movies, for example. What makes a hero a hero? Well, he puts the needs of others above himself, and he's willing to lay down his life to save the kingdom. He's willing to lay down his life to help somebody, to you know, do whatever. You can be that, but you have to decide. And just like if you're going to be the hero of the story, the hero goes through many trials. And the best stories are about refining the hero. And then by the end, he or she's the person that they were supposed to be to begin with. So they usually start out maybe a little more naive or selfish, but by the end, there's someone who can rule, or someone who has influence, someone who has impact. Your life can be the same way, but you have to decide if you want that or not. And if you don't want it, you may just get stuck in the same place. But if you do want it, God's grace can help you propel, because it's not about the mistakes you make along the journey. It's, are you even taking the journey? That is the biggest thing. Are you even taking the journey?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people, they'll initially think that it's the salvation moment, right? That it's the born again moment. Like, are you willing to, you know, get rid of your old life and live this new thing? But it's more than that. It's something that we have to continue to do, right? Each one of the disciples gave up something in order to follow Christ, right? One of them was a doctor. One of them was a tax collector. You know, society didn't really like tax collectors at the time. They were like thieves, basically, in their eyes. But he was wealthy. Exactly. He had money. Put down your nets and follow me. Sell everything and follow me. Every single person that Christ encountered, he wanted them to give something up and follow him. It was not a one-step process. There were multiple steps to it. And so in our lives, there are going to be things, legitimately good things. Being a doctor is a good thing. You're healing people. But Jesus was concerned about more than physical bodies, right? Being a fisherman is a good thing. Now, in that society, fishermen were also looked down upon. They were like the lowest of the low. They were almost unclean from a spiritual level. It was very, very bad to be a fisherman. They were very looked down upon. But they fed people. That's a good thing. But Jesus was concerned about their soul. Jesus was concerned about feeding someone's spirit. And so every day, Christ is looking at us and asking us to let go of things, because, you know, the disciples, I mean, look at the books that John wrote. You know, we have a gospel, we have the letters that he wrote, we have Revelation, and he did all of that because he chose to give up things along the way and follow Christ. And it ultimately wasn't just about him, like you were saying, Hannah, that it's also about the people around us, that the disciples didn't just grow and become great Christians, but they planted the seeds of the church and the Christian movement that we now see worldwide, with hundreds of millions, if not billions, of people that believe in Christ because initially a small group of 12 people were willing to give something up and follow Christ. And so we don't know the ripple effect that our sacrifices are going to have. And we may not see those ripples this side of heaven. You know, John didn't see hundreds of millions of people get saved, but he's in heaven right now, and he can look down on an earth and look down at the church and how much it's grown since then, more than he probably could have ever imagined. Although John's a bad example. He got to see quite a lot of things. That's why we have Revelation. But, you know, ultimately, I've talked about this a lot on our podcast, and I will close with this statement. You guys can keep going. The Christian life is a life of self-sacrifice. If we are supposed to be like Christ and we're supposed to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. And what's interesting, when you look at that word, it's that agape love. We're supposed to love ourselves with the love that God has for us, which is really hard to do, by the way. But it's agape, right? It's God's love. That's how we're supposed to love ourselves. That's how we're supposed to love other people, with this deep, intimate love that drove God to send his son to sacrifice himself for us. And so the life of a Christian is a life of self-sacrifice. It's putting others first. Like we've been talking, like that's what makes a hero, putting other people first, right? And so as Christians, you know, I especially think about the world that we're in right now, this pandemic and everything else that we're dealing with. You know, we, the church, have a responsibility to continue to love people, to continue to put them first, to continue to sacrifice for them, because it's not just about the here and now, it's about eternity.
I have a point that I wanted to make, and going back to what it said, what we were talking about the board games, we were saying that for the sake of getting better cards, we would get rid of some of them so that there's an opportunity for God to give us better cards, right? I believe that when you were talking about giving up, it's not only about giving up the idea of having these bad cards so that we can get good ones. It's about giving up the idea of just having cards in general, just for the sake of having them, for the sake of winning a game. Instead of, if we stop thinking about like, oh, well, I'm going to give the card of, I don't know, of being poor so that I can get money. That's not what God's talking about. When he's talking about sacrifice, it's about giving up the idea of just like making money something that's going to be part of my identity and what's going to give me my identity. He's basically saying, I want you to give up that idea. And as Paul said, so that I can endure all things, because even when I have much or when I have little, it doesn't matter because I have God. It's like about like taking 2 steps back and being able to say, I want to enjoy the game regardless of the cards that I have. Yes, it's going to be better if I give these cards, because that way I'm as you were saying, like for the sake of others, I'm going to be able to move the game around and it's going to be more enjoyable for everybody. But taking 2 steps back and saying like, I want to enjoy life the way that you, God, want me to enjoy it, and for your sake, not just enjoy it for my own sake, for my own desires, for how I want it to be, but how you want it to be. I'm thinking about life, not about this 80 years, 50 years, 70 years, whatever, how many years, but about eternity itself. If I want to enjoy it, if I want to have more players with me to be able to enjoy with afterwards, then how am I enjoying this life? How am I using this time? Am I just giving up the cards and just saying like, I want to change myself just for the sake of myself? Am I being that selfish that I'm saying, oh yeah, sure, I love others, but I'm just doing everything so that I can have the best that I can have? Or am I actually saying what God did and like, I'm giving up even my own life for the sake of others and loving others? Yeah. To the point that I'm like, yeah, I'm going to give everything away because I know that that's the best in this situation, or in any situation for that matter. So
it's really good. Thank you. Really good point.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Gabe said. Sometimes the sacrifices we make are things that we want and what we desire. It reminds me of the rich man that Jesus went to. He said, give up everything, throw riches and everything, and he's give up all to follow me. But he didn't want to do that. But that's really the ultimate sacrifice.
Definitely.
2 last quick things real fast. With everything going on with the virus, 2 things have been happening to some people. One, it's been an increase in temptations, or those who deal with addictions. It's been really triggering for them. And that's a whole other topic, but sometimes we use temptations or addictions as coping mechanisms to deal with hard things. And it's a constant process to learn, am I willing to give up this thing that might give me pleasure right now for the better thing that God has for me? And so that's been something also that I've been processing with some people. And the last thing real fast, with so many people losing their jobs and the economy be affected, and people being affected financially, and even I'm having some impact with all this, there's a temptation to, again, hold on to all of our money, hold on to all we have. And I've had to redo my budget a bit, but one thing I want to make sure I keep doing is to continue to give when I can, continue to help other people, because I think that's also what God wants of us. Are you willing to still be wise in your decisions, but still trust me to support those who might be worse off than you, or might need something else, because I will continue to bless you. So
Definitely, those are really good points. I reminded, this is the last thing that I'll share, of when I was in college. I was listening to a pastor speak, and one of the things that he said that I have never forgotten, this has been 7, almost 8 years now. He was praying for the student body before going into his sermon. And one of the things that he said was that we all have this idea of the American dream, right? A wife, 2 kids, a dog, picket fence. And he said he prays that that never happens, and that we lay our life down for something that matters. And that can be a really controversial thing to say, but it's stuck with me, and it's stuck with me ever since then. And I'm constantly reminded that it's not bad to have good things. It's not bad to be successful. But if the good things and the success are what we're aiming for, then we're aiming for the wrong thing. Because the only thing we should be aiming for is people and getting them to the Father. Because we can't take success to heaven. We can take souls to heaven, and that's it. And so thank you guys, each of you, for what you've had to share during this podcast. I think it's all really, really good that we are giving up things, good things, bad things, doesn't matter. We're giving up things for the cause of Christ, for his kingdom. So thank you for watching. Thank you for being with us every week. We appreciate you. We love you. God loves you. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next week.
And then to Brian.
All right.
I'm gonna leave
Just
that.
kidding. We don't need to do that, obviously.
Okay.
It was like starting this phone.